The thing is, if you listen to the music we were writing at first, and then the music we were writing 6 months later after just training and getting masterclasses with Dave, it's night and day, because he just came in and said, oh no, consider these things. If you're in this kind of situation, do this. Oh, this is the best bit. Stick that at the front of the tune. This kind of stuff.
Matt Griffin and Dan Murdoch are both composers and sound designers at Playtonic Games, the self-described home of Yooka-Laylee and nonsense puns. Their most recent game is Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair, where they got to collaborate with veteran composer David Wise in bringing an old legacy to a new world. I'm Bryan Kelly, and thanks for joining us for an evening at the Roost.
Hi, I'm Matt Griffin. I'm composer and sound designer at Playtonic Games.
Hi, I'm Dan Murdoch. I'm also a composer and sound designer at Playtonic Games.
Dan, I'm curious, you said you got started with the company right after the Kickstarter. What was that like for you?
Pretty hectic. It was pretty good, though. It was one of those ones where I just came in and no one was doing anything with the audio, and it was like, you sort it. And I was like, cool, I'll go do that. And that was pretty much it. It was about a year and a half worth of just kind of going crazy, grabbing every resource. It was all Kickstarter budget, so it was all, and they were trying to form the company while building a game, and not even a game that was secret, and they could just carry on in the background. Like, there was a huge amount of people who wanted to know about it right now as well, so it was just very, very kind of hectic, just trying to grab everything we needed to make this thing. So it was really fun.
Yeah, and how did you find the company? Had you worked with people before, or?
No, so I was brand new. So I had just finished up on Batman at Rocksteady, and we finished my contract there, and I didn't know anyone at all. I could have contacted someone who knew someone, and they recommended me, and obviously I knew Rare really, really well, but I didn't even know names to faces. In fact, I didn't even know the names of composers who were fairly big names. So it was like, here's Dave Wise. I was like, who? Cool, fair enough. Because I love the music, but I've never really ever thought. In fact, actually, it was one of those weird things. Is what I think I looked up Rare composer many years beforehand, saw the word Robin Beanland, and just immediately in my mind attributed all the music Rare ever did to him. So getting there and being like, oh, this composer did this game, this composer did this game, was a bit weird for me. I was like, oh, okay. Oh, wow, you wrote that. I thought he wrote that. Oh, no, he wrote this one. It was. Yeah, so very much all getting to know new people.
I remember that learning curve back in the day when I thought Grant Kirkhope did every Rare song in the world. And then I slowly expanded my world and learned who all these other people were.
I'm going to get in touch with an SEO specialist so that when it says Playtonic Games composer, it's just me. And then I think that'll be hugely beneficial.
This is the long-term plan to steal Dave and Grant's legacy for your own.
Yeah.
You're going to start being invited to all these conventions. That's a good plan. I like this interview is just one step in that process. So I'll edit it very carefully. So yeah, Matt, how did you get started with Playtonic?
So I started out at TT Games working on the Lego games as a sound designer. And then I went off to the other end of the spectrum to do an indie game with about 5 people. So it was all sort of quite hectic. And then after that, I just got in touch with Dan on the off chance that they were hiring, and they were. And then went for an interview and went from there. Joined just as Yooka released, which was, as we were saying before, it was great just getting to enjoy all the celebrations around the first game without having to do any of the work.
Right. And so far, Playtonic has done 2 games. The original Yooka-Laylee, which is kind of like a Banjo-Kazooie-esque 3D platformer, and then the more recent one, which I guess came out about a year and change, Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair, which is more of a side-scrolling platformer. I've actually just been playing through it recently, and it's a delightful time. But before we get into that, I'm curious a little more to back up even further here. Matt, how did you get into sound or game music design to begin with?
Music was the only subject at school that I wasn't atrociously bad at. So I just sort of followed that.
Yep.
Got a bit of luck at the right time, getting the job at TT, and it's gone from there, really. It's just, I always knew I wanted to do audio for games from a pretty early age. Mm-hmm. Once I heard that was a thing. And I'm the opposite to Dan. I was like a Dave and Grant fanboy I couldn't believe that I was getting the opportunity to work with them.
Were you always wanting to do music, and then sound design was just kind of the way into that?
Yeah, that's sort of part of the reason why I left TT, because I did have a great time there. I had a wonderful 3 or so years there. But an opportunity to do music came up, and I thought I better give it a shot and see if I can actually do it. And it worked out quite well so far.
I'm actually really curious, what was it like doing like sound design for a Lego game? Like, what was your day-to-day like there?
Plasticky. It varied project to project. It was sort of a mix between sort of Lego-y sounds and real-world sounds. But then we did Lego Movie, where everything was made of Lego, and then the focus was a lot more on Lego stuff. But yeah, it was great.
I'm just imagining you like digging through giant bins of Legos with a boom mic right next to them.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, especially for Lego Movie.
Wow. That's so fun. That sounds like the best job.
Yeah, it was great. And there was a lot of legacy sounds as well from the previous games. So we just have massive libraries of Lego sounds, and I bet they're even bigger now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's all. Yeah, I mean, they've put so many of those games out. I have to imagine they've got a nice chunk of resources to work from at this point.
Yeah.
So what about you, Dan? How was your entrance into music?
So I was at uni at studying orchestral music. So I was kind of doing the kind of full classical kind of music kind of direction. And I generally just played video games like obsessively all the time. I never actually really thought about putting them together until like I was at uni, and it was someone talking about job prospects, and then someone at some point mentioned that, oh yeah, like there's loads of, if you were looking for like composing work, one of the big things is in games. I was like, sorry, what? You can do that for a living? And just from there. Though actually weirdly, like I was doing a lot of kind of like music up until I kind of got into the industry properly, at which point I was kind of almost entirely sound design up until Bounce was the working title of Impossible Lair, and on Impossible Lair we just wanted so much music that I was like, well, I actually used to be a composer and used to do an awful lot of this, so why not really kind of double down into this? And that was really great, kind of getting it all back into it, especially if I'd studied it for years at university and did it in my early years in indie. I used to do a lot of indie kind of like gun for hire kind of stuff as a composer. So it was really cool to kind of like, having not done it for about 3 years, get really back into it on Impossible Lair. That was great.
Yeah, and you're right. The soundtrack in that game is massive. And I think it's, is it 4 composers? Because it's you, Matt, and Dan, and then it was Grant did a little and Dave. Was that all of them, or was there anyone else who contributed?
There was also Adam as DLC.
Sorry, he's better known as Tater Tot Tunes. I'm not sure if you've released his real name there. He might be like the Edge.
Oh no!
You might get upset about that.
So the 4 of us were very much kind of made it for release. But then we, as one of the DLC packages, we did an entire 8-bit score as well. And he actually did covers of some of our music in 8-bit form, and we thought he was brilliant. And there would been like an idea of during development that wouldn't it be so cool if we could have an 8-bit soundtrack that you could turn on with one of the tonics, and it was just way too much work for us to be able to do. So we got him on board because he was so great, and he did the entire soundtrack again.
Yeah, I mean that was the crazy thing. I looked up that I forget what it's like, the retro remix soundtrack, and it's just the whole soundtrack again in 8-bit, and the quality is fantastic. Like Was that all him, or did you guys work with him on the arrangements? Or
No, it was all him.
In a couple of things, he asked for like stems or clarifications or what does this bit actually do in, and we can like show it, and give him kind of like this behind the scenes of how they were made. But yeah, entirely in his own steam. Did it so quick as well.
And I'm sure that's like a chip tuner's dream as well, being able to work directly with the developers to be able to recreate their music. That is awesome. So with a project as big as Yooka-Laylee with so many composers, how did the assignment process go for the music? How was it decided who was going to compose what?
I think a lot of it between me and Matt was whoever was free, though there was quite a lot of, levels that we kind of particularly liked or whatever, but so much of it was based on whoever's, got the time to do it and who's ever, fastest or particularly wants to do a particular level or anything. The stuff for the external, it was very clear from the offset that Grant was the best person to do the overworld, and he was locked in on that. And it was partly of a stylistic thing as well, because the idea behind the soundtrack is we learnt to write in Dave's style.
Right.
So the Grant aspect of it was all very much kind of contained to the overworld, and then we had a proportion of the levels, and if we're going to be honest, it was the earlier levels where we kind of knew, okay, we want to get as much Dave in the score as we can afford, and we want to make sure it's front loaded. So like his tracks are the ones that the player's going to hear first,
right?
And then we kind of filled in the rest with his direction.
The first year of it was just a bit of, oh God, how are we going to make sure our stuff is anywhere near up to scratch? If the player's already heard Dave's stuff going in. I think there was one point where he sent in a tune. It was the Cloud. What was the Cloud Auto Scroll level eventually called? I think it might have been Scareship Scroll. I remember that coming in and giving it a listen and being like, right, okay, I'm going to quit. It's time to quit. This has gone on long enough. I'm going to get found out here. It's just ridiculously good. Ridiculously good. There's a lot said about sort of imposter syndrome, but I was like, no, this isn't imposter syndrome. This is legit. I'm genuinely completely out of my depth here. How did I end up doing this?
It reminds me a lot of Grant Kirkhope's story when he was asked to write on Rabbids and had to remix Mario songs. He was similarly completely scared to try to write Koji Kondo music. So he can relate.
But he was already a famous composer for video games with scores that people like are in love with.
Yeah, but Kondo though.
The thing is, if you listen to the music we were writing at first,
yeah,
and then the music we were writing 6 months later after just training and getting kind of masterclasses with Dave, it's night and day, because he just came in and said, oh no, consider these things. If you're in this kind of situation, do this. Oh, this is the best bit. Stick that at the front of the tune. This kind of stuff.
So I'm curious, would you say there's any track that either of you did that you're most proud of in terms of being able to get that style down?
I think I just sort of wrote quite a bit in that vein anyway, just because Dave's been such a huge influence on me. And like I remember I went to the interview and then there was like a month gap between jobs, so I knew what Impossible Lair was going to be. And I wrote that Factory Flight. I did that one well before any of the games started happening, really, before I even joined the company. It was like the only thing I did that month, because it was the month the Switch and Breath of the Wild came out and I didn't have a job. And I sort of forgot about it for ages. And I wrote that with the...
You didn't want to put it in the game.
Yeah,
I was like you had this track. And I was like, Matt, this is great. Put it in the game. And he's like, I wrote it ages ago. It's not good enough.
That's great.
That's no point. It's like, Matt, put it in the bloody game.
So then I reworked it a bit to work for the sort of underwater factory aesthetic. And looking back on it, that's probably one of the ones I'm happiest with, which is weird because It was so much earlier than, it was like a year or a year and a half earlier than all the other tracks that made it in.
What about you, Dan? Any favorite track from the game that you did?
So weirdly, like I think Matt's style is more in that kind of like lilting Dave Wisey kind of small ensemble kind of stuff. Anyway, I genuinely think if I write true to myself, I write more of the Koji Kondo kind of style stuff. Certainly more of that kind of Zelda influenced stuff, and is usually what I'm at. So I think it was more of an interesting kind of like thing to really get into that headspace and trying to really think of like that kind of instrument groups. So the one that I think I'm most proud of is the one that when we were auditioning stuff with Dave turned around and said, this track, if this doesn't have a level to go with it, they need to make a level for this track. And it was like, okay, I've got it now. I know what I'm doing. And that was it's the airship. It's not even used for a whole level. It's this bit when you get on an airship in that auto scroll level that we were talking about before. And it's just this big jig. But when I wrote that one, it was just like, okay, right, fine, I'm on board. I know what's going on. I know how to do this now.
That's awesome. But that's so interesting that you mentioned the Koji Kondo influence, because I was playing through, I think it was Wild Web Woods, and I was like, this could be in a Zelda game. Like, I'm like, this song is extremely Zelda-like. And so I definitely hear that influence in some of your writing.
Yeah, that one I got a little bit more, what's the word? Because of the setting, I think I got away with it a bit more to go in that direction. That took no time. That one was insane. It was literally finished in an afternoon.
Really?
Yeah, fastest I've ever wrote anything.
Music's a weird job in that regard, because you can nail a tune first time and the whole thing can take about 6 to 10 hours. Or you can bash your head against the wall for about 3 weeks with exactly the same results.
It's weird how doesn't even follow a rule. It's not like the ones you write really quickly are the good ones, or the ones you spend ages on are the good ones. It's like they both can turn out really great tunes. It's just so weird how it's so unformulaic sometimes.
But then you still have producers asking for estimates. And you're like, 2 weeks?
Oh, man. I mean, this is a massive soundtrack. Was it tough to get this out on time?
We did a lot of the music early because we were very conscious of the fact that we didn't want to write under immense amounts of pressure, because that probably wouldn't yield very good results.
Yeah, I've always been a bit jealous of Matt, because there was a point which I was desperately trying to get the Yooka-1 Switch port done for that half of the year, and like Matt was cracking on with the music for the next game. I was like, oh man, I just really wish I could get rid of the Switch port because it's so annoying, and joining the music writing. But because we started so early, I think it was manageable. It wasn't easy, but it was manageable.
Was there any track that was the opposite of your favorite, the one that just gave you so much trouble that you're like, I never want to look at this track again?
Cliffside Quest. The gem ones where Oh god, it just got out of hand because it was all interactive, and there was a lot of horizontal and vertical layering to make sure you get a bit of instant feedback when you deliver a gem, but then the tune transitions on at the next nice point. And then they added an underwater section, so all these 64 files became 128 files, and there was a lot of room for human error. So that was more from an implementation standpoint. It was just like, oh god, something has gone wrong in playtesting. I now need to work backwards through all of this and fix it.
Yep. People may not remember, but Rare was one of the first developers to really experiment with that kind of music transition. Like in Banjo-Kazooie, you go underwater, you walk around the lair, and it'll transition, Grunty's lair, and it'll transition into a bunch of different songs. So it's a long tradition for these developers to really implement their music into the game, which also can be a headache for the composers. So that's always fun. What about you, Dan? Any tracks that stand out?
Oh, the thing is, it's Urban Uprise. The thing is, I love that track. I really, really love it, but I also know how much work it was, because it just went through so many iterations. Like, it was originally written for a kind of like rainforest jungle theme that was long since in the bin, and it just took a lot of parts, and it was one of those tunes that I think I had a version of it like throughout the entirety of development, and then kept finding a new bit to add to it. So it wasn't like I sat there for 3 weeks and hammered it out. It took like a full year of going back to it, adding a little bit, taking a little bit out, to eventually I had something that was actually a full looping 2 minutes. I
think those are the hardest ones when design changes come in. Like, oh yeah, it's raining now and it's nighttime. What do you mean? That's ruins everything.
I wrote a really happy, perky song. What are you talking about? Oh, also, Laylee died in this section, so he's mourning the loss of Laylee.
Yeah. Can you not just like make it a bit rainier? Like, no, let's start again.
Yeah, I guess that's what you get for starting early, right? This is why people score movies late.
The thing is, though, it actually worked really well for us. Like, for every track we had to redo, there were loads that actually did fit, and sometimes you could even play them to an artist and they go, oh, okay, I get the vibe that you went for. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes.
Yeah. Did you guys, or were you mostly like working from concept art when writing, or what was the stage of production like when you were coming up with the songs?
I think the concept art was, it always is very, very helpful. Like, seeing a level white box is one thing, but that doesn't tend to inspire you nearly as much as concept art does. And we've got some really amazing artists at the Playtonic studio, so when that stuff starts coming through, that's like, right, okay, that's when ideas start coming into your head.
How would each of you describe Dave's musical style?
But he's got his own sound, doesn't he? And when you can hear 5 seconds of one of his tunes and be like, yeah, that's Dave Wise.
It's a lot of it is very thick and percussive. There are so many different rhythmical elements going on at any one time. That's one of the big things. He's also someone who just will not have a held pad. It will always have to be a rhythmic pad, or is never going to be a point where there's just a held chord. It's always going to have some kind of like choppiness to it. So everything's giving you a bit of a rhythm to latch onto, no matter which part it's in or how many different elements there are going at any one time. There also tend to be, at least maybe not so much in the past, but his more recent stuff, they're really thick textures. You have a lot of instruments and a lot of doubling and a lot of interweaving parts. So yeah, they're really quite something. His mixing blows me away. Like, I listen to how many different elements there are making a tune, and his mixes are really, really good. And I just think, oh my god, how have you mastered this? It's so hard to get that beautiful kind of like array of timbres and textures, like all fitting nicely together. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it's just a master of groove and feel. You always get that from his tracks.
What was the process like working with him? Were you sending him your tracks as you made it? Did he mostly like front load it, or how did that kind of go?
So you're going to start in the position that we're in. He was our composer, not the other way around. So at the end of the day, so I was lead on that project, and he would send me his music, and I would have to feed back to him on what I thought of it and ask him to make changes if necessary. So if you think, oh, I'm going to have to write music that stands up to Grant and Dave is nerve-wracking, try also having to critique and feedback and sometimes ask for improvements to be made on their music. Man. Which is a whole new kettle of fish. So it wasn't so much a thing that we would send our finished music to him and he would approve it. It was actually the other way around. But what we did was create a lot of music. He'd come in, we'd play him all our stuff that we made so far. He would kind of give us general feedback, but you found that the feedback that he gave us earlier on in the development process, by the end of the project and the tunes that we're making towards the end, we didn't need that feedback anymore. We knew how to write better. So yeah, that's kind of generally how it was.
Yeah, it was like every bit of feedback, you would then keep that in mind the next time you're writing. And you'd catch yourself doing the same things and be like, maybe I should try something different here. Of course, the whole Dave coming in to sort of chat with us and about our tunes, it was very, very nerve-wracking at first, but he's a nice guy, and it got a lot easier pretty quick.
I think half of it is, if you're getting feedback of the quality we're getting, it just was, it suddenly, it's not just, oh, the scary man's going to coming in to judge us. It was like, oh, we're going to learn so much. This is going to be so useful.
Over the course of like a month, it went from like really nerve-wracking to like a really exciting, like, yeah, it's a Dave day.
Time to level up. Yeah. Was there any feedback or stuff you learned from this process that stands out?
Well, I can't just go telling everyone.
You're right. You guys worked hard to get that information.
Yeah. So it was just, there wasn't like any big overarching things. It was just lots of like little specific things.
That's often the case.
Yeah, and even that thing that Dan said about held pads. Like, why not stick them through a gate or a filter, make them dance around a bit, add to the groove of the overall piece.
If you are interested in learning more from Dave Wise, check out his new YouTube show of where he explains how to make music better.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, what a perfect plug.
He's doing that. I'm gutted about that. He's probably doing it with us and realizing like I should be getting paid a lot more for this.
That's so cool. I have to say, probably my favorite song in this game, or up there with my favorite song, was the actually the rearrangement you did of Dave's main theme for the Pagey challenges.
So strange how many people say that. We didn't even put it on the original soundtrack release. I think when we partnered with Materia, they were like, no, put that in.
Yeah.
Because that was sort of bashed out pretty quick because we had these challenge rooms going.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny.
It is weird, right? Sometimes just the quickest ones. And yeah, it's a simple song, but it's it's in the classic tradition, I find, of like the Donkey Kong Country bonus songs, very happy, cheery. It's classic Dave Wise stuff, and just takes his theme and gives it that kind of that perky kind of folksy treatment, and it just makes me smile every time I hear it. So yeah.
I remember recording the melodica parts for that really late at night in the studio, and everyone was just getting so annoyed hearing the same little loop go around and around and around, because melodica's not a nice sounding instrument on its own. I mean, it's effectively a toy, isn't it?
But you have to get that part just perfect. So
yeah, I had to get it right. I had to get it in one take. So I just had to come out after about an hour and be like, "Sorry, guys."
Yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah, apparently, you need some better soundproofing in your studio. Save the rest of your coworkers.
Well, that's why we were doing it at night.
Yeah. So okay, we've talked enough about Dave Wise. What are other inspirations, if any, y'all had for this? Any composers or games or movies that kind of inspired you going into it?
Loads.
Yeah.
Sort of too many to list, but obviously we were
looking... Do you want a list of my favorite bands?
That's always cool, it's all good.
It sounds a bit obvious, but obviously for this one we were looking back at the Donkey Kong Country series a lot.
Yep.
We were putting in loads of examples of different kind of like small ensemble folk music. I think that was the general idea behind the soundtrack. It was we need to make something that feels like you could play it. Like if you and a bunch of mates were to grab a bunch of instruments in the pub and you all had half an ounce of musical skill, you could probably play this over a pint in a little pub somewhere. Like that was the general kind of vibe most of the time.
Yeah.
And we were basically looking at all these kind of like small folk ensembles that did just that. So we got an awful lot of influence from that kind of stuff.
Little Big Planet was a game that did that really, really well, and all the sequels as well. Sort of small arrangements that sounded huge.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea because there are a lot of different styles in this game, a lot of different types of instruments, a lot of different kind of atmospheres, but that's an interesting way to tie them all together, as they all have that kind of that intimate sound. None of them get too big or orchestral or anything like that.
Yeah, we wanted to save the orchestral stuff to Grant and the Overworld. And then at the start, when we were knocking out art styles and stuff, we were kind of saying, we're going to go easy on the synth in this one. We're going to try and avoid too much electronic stuff. But then later in the game, there's a level where there's a factory on fire. You're being chased by a robot with a giant laser, and you're like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have to use a bit of synth here. So you set out a musical direction, but then the game will throw things at you where you go, okay, we're going to have to bend the rules a bit here.
Yep. Well, it's a classic Donkey Kong tradition. Is once you're in the factory, some synth comes out. It's just what has to happen.
Yeah.
Did you look much at Tropical Freeze's soundtrack?
Oh yeah.
Even the game before Impossible Lair that I did called Unbox, I was still looking at Tropical Freeze a lot, 'cause it's just an unbelievable soundtrack, just start to finish.
I think we made a conscious decision to never use steel drums again because Matt was so fed up with them.
Yeah,
how much
I sort of overused them a bit on my previous soundtrack.
Yep. So what was that game?
That was called Unbox Newbie's Adventure, a game where you play as a cardboard box, the ultimate postal delivery service.
I mean, you can't really have a better pitch than that.
It's really good. it's really annoying because I keep telling Matt how good that game is, and he's like,
no, it's
good
one of those. I like it, but obviously, I've worked on it for like 2 years, so I'm not going to play it.
Yeah.
I can't even find myself playing the games that I've worked on. I always get them on release day and I'm like, oh right, here we go, and then you boot it up and you're like, oh god, this, yeah, no, of course, I know this. Like, I'm sick of this.
The thing is, I can't put a project in my mind to bed unless I've platinum trophied it.
Really?
Like, for me, it's not. Yeah, it's really bad because it means I'm gonna have to platinum trophy everything I've ever done. At least 100% or get pretty damn close.
Impossible Lair, no bees.
I've got it.
No bees.
No, I that's thankfully not part of the trophy. But no, I've a platinum medal. In fact, I waited for the update that makes the lair ever so slightly easier.
With the little checkpoints and stuff
to do it.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I knew I could do it because I have done it without that crux to lean on, but it took me so long. I did it during development once, and I just thought, no, I'm not doing that again. I'll wait until it's easier.
Yeah, I was looking at the Impossible Lair, and I'm like, the developers must be really sick of play testing this, because this is a lot. Very cool idea, though. I've never seen a platform do that before, where you can access the last level from the very beginning of the game. I think that was a really neat trick. So, I'm looking at the Unbox Game website, and no, I agree. Damn, this looks really cool. What a neat project.
It's great. Like, if you're a massive 3D platformer fan like I am, like, there are a few 3D platformers to really sink your teeth into. But this one's a great one. It seems, I think everyone who likes that genre, if you played Yooka and you played Hat in Time and you played Mario Odyssey, then Unbox, I think, needs to have a little bit more love.
I do love Unbox, by the way.
Yeah.
I know.
Dan's made it sound as though I've been slagging it off. No, I do love it, and I loved working on it. It was a really, really fun time in this tiny little office with like 5 of us.
Oh my gosh.
Great. I've just come from like Warner Brothers, which was like 300-person studio, churning out a AAA game every 8 months or so.
Jeez.
It was just the complete other side of the spectrum, and we just, it's great at first. We just sort of had no idea what we were doing, and then learned as we went along. It was great.
Right. How did you end up at that project?
A good friend of mine is the managing director at Prospect, and he somehow, with his silver tongue, convinced me to leave this job that I loved, and that I felt very good. I was very happy about being, and just sort of went for a drink. And then over the course of about 2 hours, he planted the seed in my mind, and I was like, no way, man, no way am I leaving this job. And like 2 weeks later, I just gave him a call back, like, okay, I'm in. I don't know why, but I'm in.
That's a crazy jump from like, this massive AAA developer to like, hey, check out Newbie's Adventure. It'll be great, I promise.
Yeah, that was it. It was just a crazy lurch from one side of the industry to the other.
Were you guys both a part of Warner Brothers then? Because you was Rocksteady, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that how you met?
No. I think I sent an email to Rocksteady people once asking for Batman sounds when we were doing Lego Batman, but I don't think it was Dan.
Oh, it wouldn't have been me. I was the dialogue person, so I did all the dialogue sound design.
Oh, that's interesting. For which titles?
Oh, just Arkham Knight. So I did basically my life was recording dialogue, making everything sound like it came across like a radio or echoing around the city, or anything to do with anything anyone spoke. It was my job to clean it up and make it sound good and put it in the game. And so that was. I'll tell you one thing, it is amazing to hear Luke Skywalker in a session. You've got that because we get the sessions. I listen to him taking directions and talking to the person talking directions. Oh yeah, no, cool, yeah, right. And then getting into the Joker voice and hearing that transition from one to the other. And I was like, whoa! I don't know if there's many people in the world who have heard this. It's amazing. So it's really cool.
All right. Well, I think that might bring us to the end of this here interview, unless you all have any, gems of great wisdom to share with the world before we go. Yeah. Okay. Always just got to check.
Oh, no, I think you're looking in the wrong place in that regard.
All right. Well, thank you both very much for your time. This was great.
Been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.